Hi, welcome to the Wagner Students for Criminal Justice Reform podcast. Today, I, Thurston Powers, have Sheba and Kiyomi, and we
Hi.
are going to talk about bail reform and the no tolerance movement.
So excited. Thank you guys so much.
Glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about who you are, Kiyomi.
Okay, my name is Kiyomi Calloway. I'm a Los Angeles native. I am a drama student at NYU Tisch. However, I am very politically and social justice related passionate, and I just want to make sure that I am putting 110% of my efforts into not only being a great artist, but also being a great active citizen.
And so this is our first podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Of course, I'm super excited to be here.
So we also have Sheba Rivera. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I am a second-year NYU Wagner student, and I'm also directly impacted by the punishment system. So I am very interested in learning ways that we can make it more equitable, make it more fair, make it more effective, and more about restoring and transforming lives than about punishing lives.
And I'm Thurston Powers. I come at this from the individual liberty perspective. I feel that the criminal justice system is incompatible with a lot of the values that our country was founded on. In particular, over the next month, we're going to be talking about bail reform. Now, in our weekly digest, we had a story from NBC News talking about the cash bail system and how states are finally starting to move away from it. What are your thoughts on this, Sheba?
So I feel like this is not quite happening fast enough, but I'm also not excited about the ways that we're moving away from the cash bail system. And I think until you start looking at the root of how many people are being arrested, everything else is starting to look like a Band-Aid.
I agree.
I agree.
A lot of the methods, so the current DOJ argues that the cash bail system breaks the Eighth Constitution because the Eighth Amendment in the Constitution, because it specifically says you cannot charge excess bail. Now, there's some disagreement about what counts as excess, whether you're talking about a person's ability to pay or the crime itself. But a lot of the solutions that we're seeing, constitutional questions, like, for example, ankle bracelets that record audio. So, I mean, are you violating their Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment? Are you allowing them to incriminate themselves?
And it also, and I feel like it also brings up the question of then whether or not like you're really trusting that they're innocent before proven guilty. Because if you have an ankle bracelet and you're recording them, then it's really, I feel like, violating their status
Right,
before they even go to court.
Absolutely. I mean, on one hand, it's like, one of the ideas that has been going around is giving people an option. But if you're poor and you're innocent, what are your options? It's surveillance. So it is quite a conundrum.
Right, and if you see some of the assessment models that they try to use instead, trying to say, well, we can decide whether or not this person is going to show up for trial by looking at some other factors in their lives. A lot of times they use racist assumptions. For instance, has one of their parents been incarcerated before? Well, we know that primarily that's going to, disproportionately affect people of color. So are we really using something that's talking about this individual, or are we now just perpetuating racism in how bail is set out? So it becomes maybe less of a problem for white defendants, and then maybe less on our radar, but then it becomes even more of a racial issue.
Yeah, and I mean sorry, continue, Kiyomi.
No, it's okay. I was just going to ask, why not choose an ankle bracelet that doesn't record? That's like also another alternative. The recording device doesn't need to be initiated in that. And like speaking to the racially disproportionate methods, the idea of bail is racially disproportionate because we see like the racial insinuations in our economic structure and how many of the upper class are still disproportionately Caucasian. And so although I don't, I'm thinking of a better alternative to bail, but it seems that we're at quite a standstill.
Well, I mean, we are seeing a lot of movement, though. And it's not in the places you would expect. There's a lot of discussion of criminal justice reform in some of these northeastern, very dark blue states, but you're seeing budget problems in the red states drive a lot of the criminal justice reform, and also, the interest in expanding individual liberty. But it is surprising to see how much reform is coming out of places like Wisconsin and Texas, and just in the news last week, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Right, and it's interesting. I do think there is reform coming out of both blue and red states, but I think that, like you're saying, it's coming from many different perspectives. So blue states are taking different routes, like, for instance, fair chance policies, ban the box for employment, whereas red states are, because of how they would, perhaps not be in line with that sort of thinking, which you I'm sure speak to better than I can, but is the idea that you shouldn't be telling businesses how to run their business. They go a different route. So I think that both of them see that our system right now is rigged, and they want to see how they can dial back all these previous tantrums that they have about, let's stop the super predators and let's be tough on crime. They both want to start to dial that back, but they're starting on their party script. So it's like, what is my party going to be okay with? Either way, we know you've got to do something.
Exactly, and it's less about this political divide and more just about enacting equal criminal justice system policies. And it can be quite frustrating because these politicians and let's say like policymakers want to enact bail reform that will be in line with their political party, instead of thinking of like the true purpose of reforming, which is making sure that all citizens have an equal chance of being innocent before being proven guilty, and making sure that they're not in jail just because of a socioeconomic disadvantage, and so it's sad that it has to be like a competition between red and blue states, but even though it doesn't need to be.
Well, I mean, if the competition means that, they're both racing to reform the criminal justice system, that's a competition I welcome.
Yes, that is true. That is very true.
Now, Rikers in particular has been a horrifying focal point of the bail reform discussion. Now, Rikers has been brought up on other constitutional issues, such as violating the other part of the Eighth Amendment, which is the cruel and unusual punishment clause. But what I find most egregious is the fact that we are talking about a place that being imprisoned in borders, possibly passes the cruel and unusual punishment definition. And we are putting people in there who have not had their day in court for 8 months, sometimes more. That is horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was years in the case of Khalif Browder.
Yeah.
And much of that time in solitary confinement, for someone who's a young adult.
Yeah.
And even with like Sandra Bland, and it begs the question of who are they deciding to leave in these jails? Who are they deciding to forget? And I think that's where the racial implications start to come in, because there are already have been trends with with bail and with leaving people in jail cells. So these jails, leaving them in for 8 months at a time isn't going to help progress or reform at all and help bring about justice.
And there are societal costs to keeping people in a prison for that long. I mean, if you think about what happens to that family that is now missing, like presumably a male that was working, their income drops. They might have to find childcare. They might need to work part-time. They have to restructure from a system of a division of labor that was working for them. It's disruption. It's deadweight loss.
Right.
And then what sort of social connections does that person make when they are in jail? Like there's a concern that long stays in prison criminals.
Yeah. And the way they're treated can bring about a mentality, possibly, that could very much change the way their behavior outside of jail once they leave the jail cell because of unjust treatment of them during this time period. Or even in the sense where maybe families don't have another caretaker, maybe single moms, and now it's up to the court system and like the family to figure out what maybe those children will have to have for parental guidance.
Right. And it's also harder to be able to construct a defense for yourself if you're in jail. If you're out, you can get a good lawyer, you can investigate. There's so much that you can do. If you're in jail, your hands are tied. And then many times you're brought to jail still wearing the clothes that the jail gives you, not wearing your plain clothes, because it's already such a hassle to have to bring you to jail. So they just don't even think, oh, this is, I mean, we're all going to just shuffle them in front of the judge anyway. What does it matter? You know, they may not even take the shackles off of you. So what is this image now that it looks like, you know, that you've been in jail for months, you haven't put together a defense, and all of a sudden you're in front of a judge and looking like you're guilty, looking like you need to stay where you are. So it's very unfair.
Yeah, and I know we also talked about this, just a connection to NYU. For Tish, at least, part of our required reading was the Aperture magazine, and we had some of the founders and editors come in and speak to us about the power of image and what is that visual image, going off of what you were saying about having them stand in front of the judge in their outfit. What does that visual image give to them? What's an implicit that's going in the back of that judge's head or the court participants' heads as they see this person in a jail uniform?
So this topic we're going to be covering for the next month here at Wagner's. So let's transition to what you're doing, Kiyomi. What can you tell us about the no tolerance movement?
Oh, okay. So it was started this summer. A group of friends and I were going off to college, and we decided why not use this time that we have before college to start something that we're passionate about. We've for years have been seeing Black individuals shot and brutally treated because of the color of their skin and implicit biases. So why not do the best we can to help at least enact some change in regards? And due to a lot of interest in politics, we wanted to make sure it was more policy-based and more reform-based. So we started a no tolerance movement. We definitely get a lot of like opposition to the idea, the title of no tolerance, that juxtaposition, because I think so much of social justice is about negotiations with others, but it's not no tolerance in that sense. It's no tolerance in the sense of we don't have tolerance for inequalities. We've had the opportunity, or at least I've had the opportunity, to grow in an environment where I don't have to experience the same kind of segregationist tactics that they had individuals had to experience during the 50s. Segregated water fountains, bathrooms, and other policies that the plentiful racist policies you can imagine. But I have to experience different kinds of racism, more systemic racism, and so do my other peers and allies who have to watch this happen, or don't have to, but watch this happen. And so we have experienced a different kind of freedom that I believe like the older generations, or like at least my grandmother and her mother experienced. And so we know what we want, and we don't want to have to tolerate this. There's no tolerance for this. So it's about fighting against systemic racism and brutality, and fighting for equality and justice through a series of policy reforms that we did research on, talked to you guys about, and hopefully compiled a list that also matches up with other movements and goals, such as like the Black Lives Matters platform, and so on. And the Saturday before Election Day, which is next Saturday, it's come up very quickly, November 5th, we will have national protests. So in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Chicago, DC, and New York. And the New York one will be in Columbus Circle, or at Columbus Circle, right next to the statue, from 6 to 11 p.m. And it is more than just about bringing awareness. It's about getting attention and fighting for these policies to help progress our gun and race relations reform.
So, this sounds like a huge movement. Sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
It is very exciting. I'm very excited. Also very nervous, but very excited.
Yeah. Can you tell a little bit about what you're nervous about?
Yeah, for sure. This is my first time organizing a protest / movement. And so, and I'm not, sorry, I shouldn't say this is my first time, because I have a group of, we are a group of organizers organizing it. This is our first time organizing a movement and protest. And it is difficult, especially like coming in as freshmen, because the majority of us are freshmen in college as rookies, without much experience, without stepping on the toes of those activists and those protesters who've been here so much long before us and put in the time and dedication and sacrifice and efforts that they have that are so commendable. And I respect them, and I'm so humbled by them. And I really want to make sure that I am not disrespecting them in any way or opposing their efforts in any way. I want to make sure that it's a united front rather than like a different movement that's like not fighting for the same end goal. So that's what I'm mainly nervous about. I don't want any local efforts to feel as though I'm just coming in and then leaving, or we're just coming in and leaving. And I'm also nervous about how it's received, but I know that different protests and different movements are always going to be received in different ways, and it's about being prepped for that, and it's about thinking about the bigger idea and the bigger goal.
So this past week, there's been a new Gallup poll showing that support for an assault weapons ban is at a all-time low. So why is No Tolerance focusing on firearms?
On what? Sorry, why is it
on firearms?
Oh, firearms. Yeah. I think that poll's really interesting because I find it fascinating that in times of violence, some resort to devices that cause the violence. And so I definitely think that at least my presumption is that that's one of the reasons why the results are so low for that Gallup poll, is because people may see, oh my gosh, there's so many police shootings, or certain individuals may see that, or see, oh my gosh, like we have a presidential candidate who's inciting so much violence. And so our answer is, let's not ban firearms, let's get more firearms, which I definitely don't understand. I wasn't raised to believe that, but we're focusing on firearms because I remember in high school there was a discussion on whether or not gun violence is the issue, or racist mentalities and like implicit bias mentalities are the issue. And I remember sitting there and thinking, like, in our discussion, wow, this is like not a fair comparison. This is not a fair discussion, because I feel like they go hand in hand, especially now. And I think that focusing on firearms may be somewhat of a Band-Aid for racist mentalities that are behind these firearms that are shooting at Black individuals. But if you can take away someone's gun, if you can take away their firearm, then it takes away a part of their power, and a part of the power that they feel they have over other individuals. Although words still cut deep and other actions still cut deep, firearms are still integral in obviously police shootings and just other citizen shootings of Black individuals, that taking away these firearms would be an important step in progressing towards a more justice society.
But aren't you also taking away people's right to defend their life?
I don't think that them shooting an individual because they believed they were a threat to their life is taking away their opportunity to defend themselves, because I think that a lot of times people think that their lives are being threatened, even though it's really just an implicit bias in the back of their head telling them that their lives are being threatened. But we're not looking to ban like all firearms and all defense weapons. There are other ways to defend yourselves as well. It's just there's no need for revolvers, and there's no need for, I'm sorry, like, not revolvers. I'm not very versed on guns, but there's no need for the semi-automatic weapons and such to defend yourself.
But all the like handguns are pretty much semi-automatic.
Yeah. I just think that I'm not going to lie. I'm not very versed on the different kinds of guns. I just know it's unnecessary to have guns that are for basic everyday use. I have friends who own guns, and I have friends who go hunting, and friends whose parents do the same. And they also agree with me that there's no need for the violent kinds of weaponry that we see in media and pointed at Black individuals. And also there are other ways to defend yourselves. Like, guns don't need to be the first tactic in making sure that your life is safe. There's self-defense, there's pepper spray, there are other options, not that you would need those against Black individuals, because them being Black doesn't make them a predator or a criminal at all. But if that is really the concern of those individuals with that implicit bias, there are other ways to defend yourself than guns.
Unless they have a gun.
But if the guns are banned, then technically they wouldn't have a gun.
Well, you can 3D print 22 caliber semi-automatics.
You can what? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You can 3D print 22 caliber rifles and handguns.
Oh,
can you? Do you know?
That's an advance in technology, which I did not know about.
I think getting guns.
Sorry, go ahead.
Getting a gun is easy enough that some people don't really need to 3D print them either, whether they're legal or not. And but maybe we could talk about some of the other policies also that you've included on your platform.
What about school busing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Since since our discussion previously online, I like rethought about it with my friends, and we actually changed the school busing, because we realized that it maybe wasn't the most effective, and we looked into like other more local efforts such as like redistricting schools that seemed to be more effective. So we took that off of the platform. But in regards to busing, I just know that like a big issue, obviously with like racist mentalities, or it stems from education, and it stems from what people are taught. No one is born with this mentality, and it's taught to them. And so we wanted to make sure that we were touching upon all bases of like how to help solve inequalities in the criminal justice system. And we believe that hopefully by having more diversity in schools, ethnic diversities, it'll bring more awareness of other ethnicities. That doesn't necessarily mean it will, but it was a hope. And it'll bring more varied opinions to the table when you're discussing history and of America, and maybe like because there are more African American students, or maybe there are more Japanese American students. You'll talk about internment camps. You'll talk maybe more about like Madam C.J. Walker and like different innovators and different struggles in these ethnic groups that will help open others' minds and hopefully make them more compassionate individuals.
What's great about that is that you're looking a lot deeper than some people look, and not just identifying what do we need to do for people who have been locked up and how can we make their lives easier, but you're kind of going back to the source of a lot of this inequality, and looking at how can we start changing the implicit biases that people have that then start to seep into our institutions, such as schools, police, and so on, banks, on and on.
Yeah. And that's another thing on making sure that so as we were connecting it back to, this is a stretch of a connection, but connecting it back to bail reform and like disproportionately how different races are seen more with criminal histories due to just like various structures that make them more prone to these histories, including ban the box on like things such as like banking and housing and education. Like it's more than just, hopefully people can see that we're fighting more than just like fixed relationship between cop and person, which is obviously an important part, but it's beyond that. It's like fixed relationship between America and Black Americans, because although that shouldn't be separated, it is. It's somewhat of a them against us mentality, and so we're hoping to close that gap. Or obviously, we won't. These single protests won't help close that gap in one day, but we're hoping to like progress to that and assist with that.
Is there a particular implicit bias training that you support?
In terms of like for law enforcement?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I definitely read how there's a lot of opposition to implicit bias training because it's believed that it's like just putting a Band-Aid on it, and like who knows what they'll think once they go out there, and we shouldn't be putting more funding towards law enforcement. We should be putting it back to the communities. But I don't think that our nation will get rid of law enforcement anytime soon. And so I think it's really important to improve on what we have until we get to that point. And so I believe, I wish everyone could take the class that I took in high school, which Race, Power, and American Identity, which was essentially analyzing white Americans and Black Americans' relationship throughout history in America, or obviously in America. And I hope that the implicit bias training goes beyond like, oh, in this situation, do you shoot because because they're quote unquote a criminal, or do you shoot? Are you shooting because you see that they're Black and you think that they're a criminal, or are you arresting this person because you think they're Black? I hope it includes analysts or analyzing one's like process when they're deciding on enforcing the law on someone. And I hope it goes back to history as well, and like analyzing why they're thinking that, and why the relationships are so tense, and what are the various previous protests, and what are like previous race riots caused by decisions that cops have made, and why were those decisions bad. So I definitely think that we hope that the implicit bias training goes beyond like in the moment and also includes historical context.
So how can people get involved in this?
Oh, and no tolerance. It's very easy. I'm constantly recruiting people, and we are constantly recruiting people. You can go on notolerancement.com. That's notolerancement.com, and you'll find a home. You'll find information on protests. You'll find some media coverage, and you'll also find the platform as well as a contact page. So if you want to really like get your talents involved, or you want to help with like organizational things, please contact through the website, or you can also find us on Facebook at No Tolerance Movement, on Twitter at No Tolerance Move, Instagram No Tolerance Movement, and we're also on Vine at No Tolerance Move as well. You can contact through any of those through those platforms. And then if you also want to organize something in your city, although it's a week away, so that would be very difficult, but if you're very much of a go-getter and hope to organize something in your city, that's a possibility as well. If it's not in your city already, you can just go to notolerancement.com.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate this.
And, thank you for like pushing this conversation, because it doesn't matter like which side of the spectrum we're on. Everyone wants a better justice system for everyone.
Yeah.
So basically over the next couple weeks, we're going to be talking about bail reform, and we're going to continue with this weekly podcast, and hopefully we can have you back again.
That would be fantastic. Maybe after the protests, I will be tuning into this podcast. And I think,
thank you.
Of course. And I think a big part of it is, as you were saying, I think at least the people I decide to surround myself with want a better criminal justice system, but it's just different how we hope, how we get there. And if we can find a common ground, hopefully, and compromise and negotiate, and I think that's also like representative of where our Congress is at right now, we can hopefully achieve that.
Yeah. I mean, what's incredible to me is how far ahead the states are from Congress. You have state governments and conservative pundits all yelling at Congress. You've got a bill in front of you that's pretty good on criminal justice reform. Just move on it. So hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. And I know with California, at least I filed absentee ballot because I enjoy voting for our propositions. One of the propositions was getting rid of the death penalty, which that's like something that I'm surprised isn't being talked about on a more like national platform. But it just shows that like if your states are moving ahead, maybe like you as a nation, you as a federal government should be moving ahead as well, and listening to the voices that are your citizens. Yeah. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed hearing what we had to say. Please subscribe. Thank you. Yeah. Have a good night.